All right. Well, good morning and welcome everyone. I'm Janelle Masterson. I'm going to be leading today's training on the crisis track software. And I am so happy to be here today virtually. I've had a lot of opportunity to come visit folks around the state since last fall when I was at the statewide conference. And then I feel like I've gotten really familiar with the Sioux Falls Airport for all the times that I've been able to come visit you folks locally. And so this is our final training offered virtually for the crisis track implementation. And today we are going to take up the full 3 hours that were scheduled. I will offer breaks. And of course, if you have something you need to do, feel free to step aside. I'm going to request that everybody stay on mute for the time being. But if you have a question or something comes up, of course, you can come off of mute and ask your question. You can also use the chat feature here at the bottom of your screen and ask questions that way. And I will see those and respond when I have the opportunity.
It comes up down here.
Everything here today we're going to be talking about is exactly the content that we shared in person. So don't think for a minute that you're missing out on anything that we did talk about in person. But again, we will take the full time today, and our focus today will be on our local administrator and EOC portions of Crisis Track. And then tomorrow, if you're joining us tomorrow, we're going to focus on the mobile app and the web URL that field users would be using to collect information from the field when you're out and about. So it is broken into two distinct modules. And hopefully, 3 hours to doing a Zoom is a lot of time. So I do appreciate your attention today. I will try to keep it as interactive and interesting as possible. And a lot of the benefit of having this particular training is that you all come from all different communities with different challenges. As we've seen across the state recently, there's a lot of opportunity to use the software to collect information on your damages with regard to your spring flooding. And so we've been able to, test it in the field now. And I think Amanda would agree that we've seen a lot of success in using the software to manage that incident and get the PA information in. So we know that it's working. We know that people are happy with it. And Amanda, if you wanted to share anything else about the spring floods, I'm happy to give you the floor before we move on.
Yeah, so we did share the information that we received through Crisis Track directly with FEMA during the PDA process, and that went very well. The data we received was pretty much transferred seamlessly and put into the PDA. And our hope is that sometime in the next couple of years, that will be the only way that we conduct PDAs in South Dakota. So we really need buy-in from everybody on this software. We all need to become as much of subject matter experts as we can on this, so that will be the way that we conduct our PDAs going forward. So.
Great. Well, thanks, Amanda. So because we do have such a big group and I want to make sure we're focusing on the software, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera. And for those of you who are also sharing your image, it's totally okay if you want to turn your camera off too. I just want to make sure everybody stays focused on the screen and what we're actually talking about today. So let's go ahead and get started. I know that we've got about 18 of you all here on the call. And if I were in person, I would be going around the room and asking, who you are and what agency you're with and what experience you have. So I'm going to ask you to use the chat function right now. And just go ahead and your name will be there, obviously. But if your name's not completely spelled out, please spell it out and tell me which agency that you're with. And two questions I have. what kind of damage assessment experience do you have of any kind, whether it's with your current position or past position, or if you've used Crisis Track before or have sat in on one of our in-person trainings, or if you were introduced to it at the conference. So again, just your name and your agency, and then your damage assessment experience and whether or not you're the littlest familiar with Crisis Track. So I'll give everyone a minute to go ahead and fill that into the chat while I talk about our overview of how the next few hours are going to go. So what we're going to do first is talk a little bit about Crisis Track and what it is and how we've been working with South Dakota to implement the software. Then we will go into using the administrative features and talking about how to administer the Crisis Track at the local level. And then, again, we'll be taking breaks along the way. And then at some point, we will also be moving on into the desktop features. So essentially, we are going to be hands-on, which gets a little tricky when we are doing an online training, because we know that some people like to learn by observing and taking notes, and others like to learn by being hands-on and interacting with the software. So I know that we're going to have a variety of different learning styles here and different levels of comfort with our software. So as much as I would love for you to really get hands-on and use the software today, I completely understand if that's a little too much to handle with different screens, etc. So again, we're here for you. That's why we're recording this session. We're going to make it available so that way Amanda can share it if you need a refresher, or if you have other employees or departments that are interested in participating. All right, so again, I still see some introductions coming in here. So thanks to everyone for putting that in. Keep at it. I see them coming in. So let's talk about the Crisis Track overview. So where this all originated, South Dakota, we know you're a big state with lots of cities, towns, townships, counties. So hundreds of applicants worth of data would be coming in for public assistance. And that is a lot of information to manage. And so what we've noticed is in the past, we had things coming in on the back of a napkin or Polaroids or a FedEx box full of handwritten notes. You can imagine how challenging that could be to decipher people's chicken scratch and make sense of all that. So what we're trying to do with Crisis Track is really streamline this whole process. So that way it starts with you all in the field, whether you are at the county level or down at the city, town, or township level. And I know from all my trainings, there's a lot of unique challenges that we have at the township level, and we'll address that as we go through the training today. But we're keeping all of that data collection local, in-house for you all. With it going into Crisis Track, the state will be able to see that in pretty much real time. So, in the past where you would wait until your damage assessment process was done before you packaged up your information and either shipped it off or emailed it as a spreadsheet or whatever you were doing, now the state is going to be able to track that in real time. And we know that there's a lot of unique details, especially related to your infrastructure. So what we're able to do now is autofill a lot of that information to save you time and improve the accuracy of the damage assessment and the estimates. So we're trying to do that in a brief time frame, right? So all of those things together are going to make the situational awareness for the state much better. And we're going to get that, comprehensive blueprint, as what we call it, by site locations, along with the descriptions and photos and estimates. So now it's not a piecemeal glimpse into what's happening at the local level. It's a broader view, along with photos, along with real detailed information that's going to help not just the PA process flow a little bit smoother, but give you all at the local level who might have some resource challenges or constraints based on different budgets and things like that, It's going to give you some extra tools to have in your toolbox to manage your incidents a little bit easier. So we'll talk about all of those features later. The important thing to note here is that all of you have your own accounts, and hopefully prior to today, you've worked with Amanda to get your MySD and your logins and all of those kinds of things. So we are going to be using a training account today. We're not actually logging in to your jurisdiction today, even though everyone here has their own access. But all of you will have your own account and you can manage that yourself. That's what we're going to spend the majority of this morning talking about. We want to stress that this is not something that we're forcing people to use, at least not yet. I know there's a goal in the future, but what we're really trying to do is support you where you are. So whatever your existing plans, policies, and procedures are, Crisis Track is not meant to supplant that or make you change to conform to using our software. It is a very flexible tool, and it truly is there to support you wherever you are in your planning and in your response. We wanted to make it easy for everyone to use. So we have a few different ways that we're collecting information. And even though we do have 3 hours of training today and 3 hours of training tomorrow, that's because we're considering you all to be those administrators. We want to give you the full lay of the land so you really understand how the software works and all of the capabilities that it has. The truth of the matter is, when it comes down to the response and actually getting out in the field and collecting information, this is a tool that can be very easily trained in a very short amount of time, you know, in the field, or just before you're doing a damage assessment operation, in your briefing, or what have you. So I know there might be a little bit of what might seem as hypocrisy that we're spending 6 hours learning about the software and then I'm telling you how easy it is. I understand that might be a little weird, but again, I'm going to give you lots and lots of details because I really want you to see and understand how powerful the tool is. And again, through all of the different trainings that we've done on site, so many different counties have come up with ways that they think they're going to be able to apply this to some other elements of their responses. And I love to hear that because, again, it's meant to support you in whatever needs that you might have. And ultimately, we're trying to support efficiency at the state level. We've noticed that over time, we're starting to see more and more weather hazards and significant events. We're starting to see those costs increase. So there's an increase in cost and increase in frequency, and we're not expecting that to slow down. So we want to be able to get rid of that paper-based process and have the state be responsive in a much more efficient manner. So if there's any questions on that, feel free to chime in. I'm going to take a minute and review here who's joining us. So Patty from Brown County, thanks for coming. And yes, flood disasters are pretty much what I've heard. So that's pretty consistent with most of the experiences I've heard about in the state. Kurt with Sully County, thank you. 30 years. Wow. Congrats. Hopefully you're looking for retirement soon. You've done a lot of public service. Thank you for all that work. Michelle in Falk County, you're new to EM, so welcome to the profession. You've got a lot of great mentors here in South Dakota. And Regan, Sioux Falls, great. Thanks for being here. Another long timer, lots of federal declarations. Wow, you can probably teach the course, Regan. Thank you for being here. Chrissy Stover, and is it Jerry, I think, or Gary, sorry, Gary. Both of you are new, so again, welcome. And I love seeing Highway and EM. I know how important it is that y'all work together there in South Dakota. Let's see, Heather. Heather, I know that I've been in touch with you before, so thank you for sitting in on this. I hope that you'll see some value for IA, and hopefully, we'll talk a little bit about the special features for that. Adam, also at SDOEM, I think, yep, a few PDAs, so that's great. So Adam is a person we want to keep happy because he's going to be reviewing a lot of the information you all are putting in. And Jason, great with the FEMA integration team. So Jason's going to keep me honest whenever I mention something about FEMA. We'll keep Jason here and fact checking me. Let's see, we've got Jason from Minnehaha. Thank you for being here. So I'm assuming that you're working very closely with Regan and Sioux Falls, right? So hopefully, if there's anything here when we talk about mutual aid or cities, towns, and townships, that you guys can see some value there to how Crisis Track is going to help you communicate better. Randy, so you're with SDOEM. Thanks for being here. Lots of experience too. I love having the experience in this group, especially with some of our newer folks to the profession. Mark, with emergency management, the NFIP coordinator. Oh, great. Thanks for being here, Mark. Yeah, lots of experience there. And Jeff with Hand County. Okay, so Jeff, I know that you had a lot of opportunity to use Crisis Track this spring. And when I'm talking about some of this stuff, I would love for you to chime in if you feel comfortable and share your personal experience. And I have pretty thick skin. I'm here to train the software and I want to make sure everyone is comfortable using it. So Jeff, if there's anything you wanted to share, I'm totally happy to take notes and bring that back to the team if it helps improve it for everybody. Dale, good to see you again. Thanks for being here, Dale. Normally, if we were in person, Dale would run around and help you all with your logins and everything. So I'm going to say everyone can chat Dale on the Zoom chat and he can help you here too. I'm just kidding, Dale, but it's okay. If anyone does need help, again, just put your needs in the chat box and we will get to those. So Andy, again with SDOEM, thanks for being here, and Colby, SDOEM. Okay, so we've got a pretty good representation from the state level, and that's great. So good combo of state and county. And again, everyone, I'm super informal here. This is for you, and I want to make sure that we're tailoring all of our time together to help you out. All right, so let's talk about now some of the capabilities of Crisis Track. So we've already dove into the why we're here, what the advantage is to the state, what the advantage is to you all at the county level. But now let's think about how the software actually works and some of the features that it has. So as we get deeper into it, you can at least understand at a high level, what is really driving the software. So the first thing we like to talk about is that it is a cloud-based disaster management application. And what that means is that you're able to access it on any web browser. And all of the data that we're collecting, everything that we're accessing is stored in the cloud. So it's very secure. We've got a lot of security protocols in place. We have redundancy on our servers. And that data is available for you all. It's your data. It's not our data. It is. It's always going to be there for you. And there's a lot of different ways that you can also export and maintain for any of your record retention policies, the data that you're using and collecting in Crisis Track. We're best known for our damage assessment elements, and that is the focus of what the state has purchased for you all. It is for public assistance process, but we also have a lot of tools, and we'll talk about those that are related to helping you with situational awareness, emergency protective measures, and documentation of other things with your infrastructure that you might find helpful just at a local level during a response. What makes us really successful in doing this is that we've got two pieces of the software. We have the desktop application, which is what we're going to focus on today. And then we have the mobile app. And the mobile app is available for Apple, Android, and Windows devices, phones, tablets, whatever it is. And when you have a field user that is doing damage assessment or looking at your highway infrastructure, they're using their mobile device to collect that information. All of the information that's collected goes up into the cloud, and there it can be accessible for people in your EOC or even at the state level. So we're really reducing the amount of time it takes for getting the information from where it's happening out in the field to either your EOC, where you're putting together priorities or objectives and resource decisions, or at the state when they're trying to gather, if it is a statewide impact with big urgency, that they're able to see this unfolding in real time. Everything that we do in Crisis Track is GIS based. So essentially, whether we're using the mobile devices to be out in the field and automatically capture a geocoded location or the latitude, longitude, or we're using some of our other manual entry methods, we are capturing that geocoded location. And that really is what FEMA wants to see on a lot of their documentation. So again, with that in mind, all of the data that we're collecting is really aligned with FEMA's standard disaster field observer information requirements. But even more than that, as we've implemented this across the state, working with your folks in public assistance, we've thought about your unique landscape in terms of the cities, towns, and townships, and we've talked about the different levels of information that you all are able to collect. And we've even streamlined those forms down even more. And so you'll see as we get into that more so tomorrow, but you'll begin to see how we've really tailored the information that we're collecting specifically to South Dakota. But again, all of the information we're collecting serves multiple purposes. First, we're trying to understand the scope and extent of our disaster impacts, where it is, how bad it is, to really give us that concept of what the priorities are, what resources might be needed. Then, as we evolve into this damage assessment period where we're getting the details to the state, we're doing that damage assessment work. We're putting the dollars and cents to the damages. We're getting those estimates. And then, as Amanda mentioned, once it goes up to FEMA, if we're getting our declarations and it's coming back and it's time to create some projects, then we're able to use that information that was collected at the very start to help us through that process with our grants portal and our project scoping. So we're not doing any duplicate effort here. From the very beginning all the way until we're building back better, we're getting all of the data recorded and with a version history and with photo continuity all the way through. And again, that's meant to create an efficiency and eliminate a lot of the administrative burden that most of you have had to deal with over the years. Now, I guess I didn't quite do an introduction of myself. And so when we talk about things that are cloud-based, as emergency managers, we know that the first thing to go wrong is communications, right? Whenever we're doing a response. And I know that even on the best day, a blue sky day in South Dakota, there's a lot of areas that you have limited communications anyway. So we've thought of that. And as an emergency manager myself, I've experienced a lot of communication challenges, and in evaluating software, I've always been skeptical whenever anyone has said it's cloud-based. So I'm right there with you, everyone. But what we've thought of is making the mobile app available to work in a limited or no communication environment. So tomorrow, when we do that element of training, we'll talk about how we can stage information to our mobile devices so that way it will function with or without connectivity. And again, the goal is to collect the data. And secondary to that is to have that real-time information sharing. So I think, again, as long as we're using the mobile devices or our alternate entry methods to collect the information, to get those photos, that still is a huge benefit and value to all of you who might have been using a variety of methods to collect data in the past. Any questions here on what Crisis Track can do for you? Okay. So just again, I mentioned earlier on about how all the jurisdictions are going to have their own accounts. And this diagram here represents, what the technical side of Crisis Track is and how it's configured. So you'll see that we've got the state who, again, very generously is providing Crisis Track to every county for free. The state is kind of the owner of the accounts, and every county within the state and tribes as well have their own instance. So that's what's represented there by County A or County B. And then you see within each of your counties, we have jurisdictions. So that's your cities, towns, and townships. And then we also reference applicants. And so we know through our public assistance training that applicants can include other entities like our school districts or hospitals, or even some private nonprofits that have a role in disaster response, like our Red Crosses or YMCAs, or even churches if they're being used as shelters and other eligible work. So you all at the county level have the ability to look at your landscape locally, and for any additional applicants that you work with, knowing that their damage estimates are going to contribute to your per capita indicator, then we want to make sure that we're collecting that information too. So everything that we're collecting within your county is going to help you reach that per capita indicator. And then that information will flow to the state and vice versa. So you can see those little arrows there. Now at the bottom, we do talk about an applicant that might be active in multiple counties. And I don't think we've had a lot of that right now in South Dakota. But if that is the case, then folks at the state office are going to coordinate with us and we'll figure that out. But ultimately, what we're trying to show here is you all at the county level are going to have a lot of control over your account and the data that you're collecting. Now, what that allows is for you all to have your own executive level reports and charts and things that you can share at the county level, whether it's with your elective bodies or your public information officers or just other decision makers. And the state also is going to be able to provide that to the folks at their level. And then the other thing that we are kind of noting here is that this model applies to both the mobile app and the desktop app. So, the things that you're collecting on your phone are going into your account and it's still configured this way. So that's just a quick primer on how the software is structured. And I'll always pause for questions. Are there any questions on that? Okay. So this slide is just our contact information. And I like to include it because I want you all to know that if you're responding, we are also responding at Javare. We are staffed 24/7, 365. So there is someone monitoring our support email and our phone all the time. And if you are having any sort of issue or concern, please don't wait until the next business day to give us a call. Let us know as soon as you can, because we want to support you. We don't want you to waste time trying to figure something out, or if you don't have access to a resource that you need and that's going to make your life easier. We want to make sure that you're getting the best use of Crisis Track that you can. So always reach out. And obviously this information, I'm not expecting you to remember it. You can also find it within our software, and I'll point that out once we get to that. But again, the point of this is really just to let you know we're there to support you. We know that if you're using Crisis Track, it's because something has gone very wrong in your community, and we don't want to add to the stress that you're already having. Using a new tool, using a software you're not familiar with can definitely be challenging and intimidating when you've got enough other things going on. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need us. So the next thing I want to talk about is the matter of Crisis Track access. So you might recall, as part of your process to getting your Crisis Track account, you had to work through the South Dakota MySD platform. And this was a requirement that the state put out, that they want everything to be a single sign-on type method. And so because of that, South Dakota is very unique in terms of Crisis Track. And we built this out just for you. So with that in mind, what you need to do is ensure that you're using your MySD account, creating that account, and that is managed by South Dakota Bureau of Information and Technology, not by us here at Crisis Track and not even by SDOEM. So hopefully everyone was able to navigate that. And the reason I like to spend a minute talking about it is because this is the situation. We have a special way of logging in. So when you go to crisistrack.juvari.com to log in, you'll see the sign in button here at the top right. And it will take you to the screen that looks like this here on the right-hand side. Now, I myself am a creature of habit, and whenever I see a blank field, I want to go ahead and type everything in there. But for Crisis Track, we need to look at the bottom of the screen where it says alternative login. And Amanda has just chimed into the chat and she's saying if anyone still needs instructions on how to do the MySD login, let her know and she'll send it over to you. And just go ahead and either send her a private chat or a chat in the box and she can work on that while we're talking about the features. But again, hopefully everyone has had the opportunity to do that in advance. So like I was saying, in South Dakota, we have a special method of logging in. Once you get to this screen where your credentials would be inputted, what we need you to do is go to the bottom where it says alternative login. And again, today we're not necessarily doing this because we're using our training account, but in general, whenever you're logging in, that's the method that you're going to follow. And if for whatever reason you did try to fill in the username and password at the top, you're going to get this red error message that says user cannot be authenticated. So this is something that causes frustration, I know. And again, folks, that's why we use the alternative login option at the bottom of the screen. So once we log in, now I'm just going to give you a little bit of information on the navigation of the software. We have what's called user roles, and within Crisis Track, the user role that you've been assigned is going to dictate what you have access to, and that makes sense for most of us. This is not different than most other software that we use. I believe everyone here on this call has been granted an administrator privilege, and that's good because we want to train you as administrators so that way you can roll it out to other folks in your agency. So if you log into Crisis Track, what you're going to see is what's here on the top left. That's the screen that allows you to access our administrative functions. It allows you to access the existing incident, and it also allows you to create new incidents. If for whatever reason you are a commander, and that's not to be confused with the ICS terminology of commander. A commander is a user role that we created in Crisis Track that is generally given to people who are in the EOC and have some responsibility for managing resource assignments and priorities, but they're not quite administrators. If that's a role that you are or that you designate to other folks within your agency, they will see what's on the top right, and you'll notice the difference is that they do not have access to the administrative functions. Finally, at the bottom is what someone with a user or viewer role would see. And the users and viewers are, well, users anyway, are the ones who really are considered to be the worker bees. Those are the folks that are just there to collect the data. So if you're from the highway department, it's the maintenance crews, it's the people who are out in the roads every day, doing their work orders, doing their tasks. But today, because it's damage assessment day, they're out there collecting damage assessment info. The viewer privilege is also something that we can give to someone who might be in your EOC, tapping you on the shoulder all the time, asking you for information about this or that. Often it's an elected official, perhaps it's your public information officer. But what we've done here in creating the viewer role is allow you to give them access to the information so they can do a little self-service and access the information themselves. So that way they don't have to interrupt you or other folks in your EOC. They're not able to modify or change anything. They're just able to view and print information from Crisis Track. So that's really the overview of our different user roles here. There is another feature, it's called the guest account feature. And what's great about this is it's our method of supporting mutual aid operations. So everyone in South Dakota is essentially our Crisis Track customer. So if you have a neighboring county where you work closely together for mutual aid, whether it's in your EOC or whether it's, again, your field personnel that might support each other for various operations, all you need to do, and we'll talk about this later, is use whatever Crisis Track user credentials that they have, and it's most likely that email address that's registered with MySD. We would just be able to plug that in, and your mutual aid asset, your neighbor, is now going to have access to your Crisis Track account as a user or a viewer so that they can help support you. So this is a feature that we know works well for agencies that are limited on resources or personnel, and work really well together to support each other in various responses. Any questions on the different user permissions? I've got it here in a very wordy format that you all can take a minute to look at, but it's essentially what I just covered. You will note there's another permission level. It's called Administrator No Payroll. That's not currently applicable to you all today, but I will mention Crisis Track is formatted into 3 different product tiers. The first tier is what we call damage assessment, and that's the tier that you all have been given by the state. It is primarily to assess damages, primarily for public assistance and other situational awareness. But our next product here is called disaster management. And that product here does have a few more features where we can track employee time and benefits. We can track equipment resources. We have a little bit more access to certain reporting formats and things of that nature. And there has been discussion in many of our trainings about what some of those features are and how they would be helpful to the counties moving forward. So I know that there's continuing discussion about whether or not the state is going to upgrade to that tier in the future. And if that were the case, this administrator no payroll feature would essentially allow administrators to access all of the things in Crisis Track except for employee pay and benefit information. So when you see this, just know that it's not applicable today, but it might be applicable in the future if your agency is going to take advantage of additional features that might be available in the future. And just to wrap up that discussion, there is yet a 3rd tier of Crisis Track called the All Hazards Emergency Management tier. And that one has even more features. It has a IAP builder and some search and rescue capabilities and things like that. But that's not something that we need to worry about today. Just focusing on the damage assessment specifically is our focus today. All right. So I'm just going to go through, I think, 1 or 2 more slides, and then I'll offer you a break, a 5-minute break, just to get up and refresh your coffee. When you log in, and again, we're not there yet, but when we log in, there's some standard screen navigation features that all of the screens in Crisis Track are going to have. So that's what I'm going to walk you through now. You'll notice when you log in at the top left, that's what we call our quick access selector. And that's really how you navigate the software from screen to screen. And with this being a web-based tool, most of us are very accustomed to using our web browser forward and back buttons, right, to navigate around a website. I'm going to encourage you to break that habit. When we're in Crisis Track, using the quick access selector is the easiest way to navigate from module to module and to get where you want to be to enter information. Over on the top right, you'll see where that number 2 is. It says Crisis Track Training. When you log in, that's where your name is going to be. And what you'll see there is the various abilities to reset your own password or update some of your contact information. And it's also where you would log off of Crisis Track. Right now, there is no limit to how many devices you can have active. So you might be active in Crisis Track on your mobile device, on your laptop, maybe a shared desktop computer in your EOC. There's no limit. And so if you are on a shared computer, we do recommend that you log off prior to leaving your shift or your operational period. So that way no one is recording data under your credentials. Also on the top right is where that help link is located. And that's going to get you to our Knowledge Center, where we have a lot of resources and how-tos, some online tutorials that are going to give you very high level information on how to do this or that within Crisis Track. That really would be your first stop if you're trying to do something and forgot how to do it. That's also where you'll find our contact information that I had shared on that previous slide. And there's also a network and application status display. If we were having a server issue or some sort of challenge with Crisis Track, we would, in addition to emailing all of our customers, we would also update that status display so that way it would be available to you. And if you were having some sort of issue during a response and your IT personnel were there to try to troubleshoot, that's just another tool in the toolbox to help them troubleshoot any connectivity issues. And then the last thing we have on the screen by the number 4 is our refresh button. So as I mentioned earlier, with us using our web browser and being very familiar with the tools on our web browser, there's also that refresh button. Again, encouraging you to break that bad habit when you're in Crisis Track. If you need to refresh a screen in Crisis Track, we're going to use this button here on the top right, because otherwise, if we use the browser refresh button, it's going to kick us out, make us log back in, and re-navigate to wherever it was that we were working. So whenever we're trying to update information within Crisis Track, we use the refresh button that you find within Crisis Track. So again, these features are going to be on every part of the software. Get used to seeing them, understand what's there, because it's going to help you be more efficient in navigating Crisis Track. All right, so as I promised, we're going to go ahead and take a break. I've got 9:45, so if you can come back at 9:50 and we will continue on. And if you need to get your login credentials, now's a good time to check on that. So please come back in 5 minutes. All righty, well, we're going to keep moving along. So in just a moment, we're going to log into our training instance, and I haven't given you access to that yet, and that's okay. But I do want to talk a little bit about how the software is laid out and kind of the focus that we're going to have on each of these various elements. So once we log in and we get to our administrative functions, the top row of that is the elements that are related to the account itself. This is the section that I call the set it and forget it section. We are going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but the reality is you're not going to spend a lot of time managing things. Because this is an administrative training, I want to make sure everyone is very clear on all of the elements. But again, it's very straightforward and you're not going to be changing a lot. This is just where we kind of get the account set up so that you can be successful. The second row of things there is our infrastructure. You'll notice there's a structures module there. Right now, all of your accounts have been populated with the results of your, oh, and Amanda, I always forget what it's called, but it's the infrastructure survey that was done last year. The results of that are in all of your accounts. And so that's what we've pre-populated here. And once we get to that section, I'll talk a little bit more about how, if you choose to use Crisis Track to its fullest extent, we can add additional information to that. And then the final element here is under what we call planning our incident. And that is where you can set some things up in advance during our blue skies, so that way it's ready to go whenever you do have an incident. And yes, Amanda's keeping me straight here. It's the small structure inventory that was conducted by South Dakota DOT and LTAP. So hopefully everyone remembers that effort. The small structure inventory, that's what we have preloaded into your structures. So again, all this administrative work, we're going to go through it all one by one and just get everyone comfortable with some of the elements here. So before we log in, I'm going to talk a little bit about first administering users. Now, as we mentioned, the South Dakota MySD login makes this a little bit more complicated and specialized than it normally would be. Essentially, you have to have your MySD account set up first before you can create new users within your county. So Amanda and Dustin, when he was in this role, worked to put a lot of you into your own accounts early on. And so whatever email that was used, probably your work email, is going to be the email you should register with the MySD. Because all of you are going to become administrators, if you had somebody else on your team, stakeholders, field personnel, whoever it is, they too are going to have to go through the MySD account creation process before you can add them as a user to Crisis Track, okay? And again, Amanda has all that information that she can share with you. It's in a PowerPoint, it's very comprehensive, very easy to walk through. But once you have that MySD process completed, then you would come into Crisis Track. Under our administrative functions, you go to our users module. You would click on new user, and you would put that user ID that is matching the MySD account. You would add the employee's information, first and last name, whichever user role you're going to designate for them. And again, an administrator, commander, user, or viewer are the 4 that you can choose from. You would put in their email, if you wanted to add their phone numbers, etc., and then you would say save. So again, it's very straightforward, but the biggest thing to remember here is the MySD account creation process. Once that's out of the way, all of you as administrators are going to be able to help create Crisis Track user accounts for anyone in your organization. So that is the one thing. Obviously, we're not doing that today as part of our hands-on module. I'm just going to speak to it. So that way, you know, as you gear up to use Crisis Track, that is a step that you can do today in your Blue Skies planning to eliminate the challenge of doing that during a response. Any questions on this? Okay. The next thing we'll talk about is our settings. So again, this is not really something I need you to do today. I'm just going to talk about it. But essentially, if you are in our administrative functions, you click on settings, this window is going to pop up. And this again is the set it and forget it window. We're never really going to manage a lot of information here, but I'm going to walk you through it so you understand what it's all about. The top box there where it says population. This is pre-populated for you by us at Crisis Track with the 2020 census data. So why this is important is that having the accurate population here is what drives the internal calculations in Crisis Track when we're trying to determine what your FEMA per capita indicator threshold is for your counties. So that's why we like to keep this accurate. And maybe, I guess it was Jason, maybe Jason has something to say about how FEMA is determining what those indicators are. But what our understanding is we're trying to standardize apples to apples and make sure we're using, you know, the population of record. So that way, when we're calculating that threshold, which is currently at $4.44 per person, that when we're trying to figure out how close to that threshold you are, then it's very accurate. Now, the state also has a per capita indicator that they're working off of, and so their calculations are going to be slightly different because they're looking at the entire state. But for most of you at the local level, that is the population that we're working off of 2020 census data. Now, the other things that are here, tracking, clustering, cluster limit, map display, block size, all of these things are related to how Crisis Track is going to display information on the maps. Remember, I said everything is geocoded, everything is very GIS based, it's very map heavy. And that's great. These settings are our default settings. Sometimes we find a county that has a GIS person and they're really into maps and different settings. If your county has somebody like that, you can point them to this setting and they can, if it's really important to them. But what we found is that these defaults work for most customers. The next thing we have here is our default coordinates. You'll notice that latitude, longitude is the default, and that's primarily because that's what FEMA likes. They like to see latitude, longitude. But we also have US National Grid and Universal Transverse Mercator coordinate systems. Those can sometimes be used for aerial or maritime or search and rescue operations. Not very common, but certainly an option for you if that's something that you need. You can always come in here and configure that. The next option we have, and this is very relevant to all of you at the county level, is a box that you can check that would allow your cities, towns, and townships to create incidents of their own. So we know that all disasters are local, right? So if you are using Crisis Track at the county level to track incidents happening countywide, some places, I'm sure, are going to rely on you and your resources at the county to start incidents and manage that crisis. But other cases, I'm thinking, Minnehaha, Sioux Falls, that might be an opportunity where Sioux Falls probably has some independence and a lot of resources. By checking that box, that means that the city would be able to create their own incidents and track all their own information independent of what the county is doing. So that's a decision that you all can make together, and every county can make that decision independently. The next thing we have here is what's called incident notifications. So if you check this box for incident notifications, you would be able to put in an email address, and anytime a new incident is created in Crisis Track, it's going to send a notification to whoever's email addresses are there. So if you've got some sort of notification process or procedure where certain members of your staff or elected officials or partner agencies need to be notified, you can easily automate that process just by plopping in a few email addresses. It's just a checkbox you turn on and off. If you choose to use this option, just know that when we get to talking about how to create an incident in Crisis Track, creating a test incident is the same as creating a real incident. So if you're using notifications and you happen to create a test incident, just know that the people in that list are going to get notified that a test incident has been created as well, unless you come in and turn it off or on, depending on what your interests are. So again, folks, the options here in settings are not things that we're doing all the time, but you can see where they can create some opportunity. The last thing that we have is a section on security options. And this is really not applicable because of the fact that you're using the MySD process to log in. So if you see anything about security options here, I would just say you disregard it because all of the security controls are managed through the MySD account. Any questions on these settings here? Again, very straightforward. All right, we'll keep moving on. Now we're going to talk about entry forms. And entry forms really form the basis of how we're collecting data in Crisis Track. And when I use the term form, I want you to envision your filing cabinet in the corner of your office. You pull open the drawer, inside is all the different folders. And every folder has a different name. that's really what this list is. It's just a list of all of the different forms that you would find in your filing cabinet. And in the past, you would maybe take one of those forms, put it on your virtual clipboard, and off you would go into the field to collect information. Now, instead, we're going to have all of the same options for documentation, but we're using our virtual clipboard. We're using our mobile device to collect that information instead. So when I say forms, that's really all I'm talking about, is in the whatever you were using in the past to document things. And for some of you, it might have just been form 1, right? A blank notepad, and that's fine. But now we're trying to move into something a little more efficient. So there's a couple of different varieties of forms that we're talking about. Because we're here for the public assistance purpose, the state purchased Crisis Track primarily for public assistance program. Let's focus on those first. You might recall that the public assistance program has various work categories. Category A and B are under those emergency work categories, category A being debris, category B, protective measures. And then we have our permanent work categories, C through G. And under category C, we're going to find things like our bridges, culverts, and roads. Category D is really water control. We don't have a lot of use for those, I think. So there's not a specific form for that based on the needs of South Dakota. Category E is our building damage or our facilities. And then, of course, category F would be our utilities, which the state is going to be getting information from your utility operators and co-ops in a different manner. So that is something that we discussed. It's just a different route that we chose to take here with this implementation. And then, of course, category G would be any of your parks, infrastructure, which again, we didn't really find that to be a great need in this implementation. So that's why those might be missing. Our focus again is primarily categories A, B, C, and E. So that's where you'll see these different forms. We have streamlined the process to differentiate between bridge, culverts, and roads. And you'll see when we get into those forms tomorrow, we've done a lot of the work for you in terms of pre-populating some of the costs for gravel, for fill, and all those different things. We've tried to make this as easy as possible for all of you who are going to be collecting the information. But again, for right now, these are the primary forms that we focus on, the primary methods of collecting that data from the field. Any of these with a little asterisk that you see here, those are going to be your most popular. So they're going to rise to the top of your list of forms that you're using to collect information. And also they are going to have a cumulative effect. So whenever we're collecting dollars and cents on the estimated damages on these forms, we're going to see the cumulative dollar amount in those categories. So that's going to, again, create some efficiency for you. You're not going to have to be doing that math or keeping track of it. It's just going to happen automatically. Now you'll note there is this form here at the bottom, lights and signs damage. That is more for your internal use to document any light or sign damage. There is not necessarily a estimated damage amount associated with that form. We have just seen in a lot of different places across the country that having a method of documenting light and sign damage was helpful for our communities. And so we're sharing that with you. The next set of forms is of interest maybe to Heather. These are individual assistance forms. And again, Crisis Track is primarily used in South Dakota for public assistance, but we have the capability within the software that you all, if you choose, can use it for your individual assistance processes as well. So some of you might already have a method that you prefer, but at no additional cost, if you choose, you can add in inventory of structures in your communities, tax assessment data that would lend itself to having you easily assess damages to residential and commercial structures. And so we have those forms available for you to use to do those assessments if you choose to use it that way. Again, none of this is required. It's just already paid for, and some of the counties that we've talked to don't really have a good method of doing this work. And so, here's an option that might be a useful tool to you. In addition to the commercial and residential damage forms, I also highlight what we call our initial damage report. And that's really just a windshield survey. A lot of you are familiar with that term, windshield survey, where you have your highway crews or law enforcement or fire personnel cruising the areas with anticipation of collecting some damage information. Again, at the very high level, this is no dollars and cents estimates. This is just a simple, is it damaged or not? Just so you can get some situational awareness in your EOC. This also would allow you to take photos. It would also allow you to document any actions that you might do. So again, it's a very simple form that you can use at the high level at a response for any kind of situational awareness. The last set of forms that we'll talk about are what we call our emergency management forms. And again, folks, these are all just available to you. It's not pertinent to necessarily public assistance, but we want everyone to understand that there's a lot of value and strength in the tool that could help you if you don't have other methods of documenting or displaying information at your county level. So the first form we have is our emergency management request. This can be a method to document everything from, setting up a point of distribution to give out water bottles or cleaning supplies, to making a request or documenting a request for barricades or signs or barriers from your highway department to a specific area. It's just a way to document those emergency actions that are happening that would support any claims related to Category B. The other two forms we have here are road closures and road closure segments. They're basically the same, except a road closure form is generally used to indicate a single point of road closure. So a tree across the road, a power line across the road, a blockage for some reason that once cleared is going to open up traffic in all directions. Whereas a road closure segment is generally something that's going to be a stretch of roadway. So if a bridge has failed or you have a flood impacting a significant portion of the roadway, these are things that are bigger than a single point that are probably going to take more time or permanent work to fix, usually going to require a detour. So that's really the difference between our road closure and road closure segment forms. But either way, we're providing you a method of documenting not just the closure, but also take photos, document any work that might occur for you to, again, use towards that Category B, emergency protective measures, and also to kind of have that situational awareness. So that way you can print maps with road closures and share that with your community in a press release or something like that. So again, folks, all of these tools are available to you. We're not going to really focus on them. I will walk through tomorrow on how to use these forms, but today, public assistance is really the focus. Any questions on the forms, why we would use them, anything like that? So the point of the module in Crisis Track, of why I'm even spending time talking about this, is if you click on view, it's going to show you all of the different fields of information that we're collecting. So that way, when you are thinking about your existing program, the tools you have at your disposal, the way that you're currently doing business, you can do a little bit of an assessment as to whether or not these will serve you in a better capacity or an enhanced capacity. So, in some cases, you might be collecting this information on a form. You can come in here, click on view, and see which of the fields might match up to what you're already doing. And so you can decide if using the crisis track form might help you in some manner. The other thing that if you click on view, it's going to show you the symbols that each of those forms will be represented by on the maps. So again, we have a legend on every map that will tell you that as well. But if you are just curious and want to take a look at all of the different forms that you have available and their symbols, it's just a place for you to look at that. So again, nothing for you to do, just for your information. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is our jurisdiction administrative features. And as I've mentioned, all of you counties are going to have cities, towns, and townships built in as jurisdictions in your account. So we're just using Hughes as an example today, the Hughes training account, which again, I promise we will be hands-on here in a little bit. But you'll see here, the screen on the left is what you would see at the county level. So when you log in to your account, this is what you have. When you click on jurisdictions, you should have an accurate list of cities, towns, and townships. If for whatever reason that list is inaccurate, please let us know. I think we've heard 1 or 2 complaints that we might have missed a township or something might be a little bit off. But this is from a list that the state has provided to us. It's been pretty well vetted, so I don't expect there to be issues, but you know your community's best. So if you were to select any of those cities, towns, or townships, what you would see here is the box on the right. Now, this is essentially what the city, town, or township personnel would see if you were to create users at that level. So let's take Sioux Falls as the example, and I'm pretty sure Sioux Falls is in Minnehaha. So if I'm wrong, someone please correct me. But so Minnehaha would see what's on the left, and Jason would create within Sioux Falls an account for Regan. And when Regan logs in, Regan would see what is here on the right. So Regan would still have the ability to create user accounts for all of his staff in Sioux Falls. And they would also be able to, thank you, Regan, for the clarification that you're in both Minnehaha and Lincoln. So I'll count that as 50% credit for me. And yes, thank you for clarifying. Obviously, the damages would be by county. So let's assume, though, that all the damages we're talking about today are in Minnehaha. So that just makes my life a little easier. So Regan would see what's here on the right, and he would be able to, if he chooses, add structures for City of Sioux Falls. He would be able to add guest users. So if someone from, a different county were to come in and help, he'd be able to add those guest users, and then also create some pre-configured tasks. So if there's snowplow routes that are already in place, or any kind of task that is a not hazard specific task, or something that's across multiple hazards, you can create that. So there's still local control by the cities, towns, and townships within Crisis Track. But ultimately, the county would also be able to see everything that's happening at the city level. The city would only be able to see what's happening at the city level themselves. So this is how we call it parent-child relationship works within Crisis Track. And I know most of you are probably not dealing with cities as capable as Sioux Falls, and that's okay. But for those of you who are, just have the knowledge that you can really give some local authority down to that city or township level, so that they're able to manage their own users and have a little bit of functionality in Crisis Track without your direct oversight and involvement. So that's what this is about. And this will also have a impact on how incidents are managed. And we'll talk about that in the second half of our training today. But are there any questions here on this concept of jurisdictions and how that kind of translates? for your community. All right. The last thing we'll talk about here in this top row is the applicants feature. Now, again, I mentioned applicants, obviously cities, towns, and townships. Those are all preloaded and you'll see them loaded when you're in your own account. But the idea that we are going to be able to add other types of applicants like school districts, like hospitals, like private nonprofits, very simple and easy to do. You would just go to the top left, click on new, and then the box will appear where you're adding an applicant. You just give them a name, whatever type it is. And if they've been an applicant in the PA process before and they have an applicant ID, you can fill it in, but obviously it's not a required field. Now, why would we go through the trouble of doing this? Well, obviously, we're only going to go through the trouble if it's an applicant that, probably has a lot of assets or has had claims in the past, or that we're anticipating could potentially have a claim going forward. But what creating an applicant in Crisis Track allows us to do is to be able to see at a line item level what those damages are. So even though they're going to roll up into the county, we are able to see by category and by applicant what those damage estimates are. So that's really helpful for you all locally as well as for the state. And again, folks, we're not saying you have to add every little nonprofit in your community. It's really the heavy hitters, the ones that you routinely work with, your stakeholders, you know who they are. It might even be some volunteer fire departments or things like that that you already rely on. So these are some of the things that you might want to consider as an opportunity when you're thinking about how to use Crisis Track. Are there any questions on that? Okay, so now we're going to talk very briefly about structures. Now, again, as Amanda had stated, the small structure inventory is what we have preloaded. So if you had participated in that process, it's those culverts and bridges primarily, maybe some roads, but I believe it's primarily culverts and bridges. We have already associated those with category C, so you don't even need to think about that. But as I mentioned before, you do have the option of adding additional structure data for other categories and for individual assistance. So what we do with most of our Crisis Track implementations is we work on a county by county basis, and Union County has actually taken us up on this. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to the folks in Union County. But we work with them to get their local tax assessment data. So that includes parcel information and improved value. And what we do is on an annual basis, we will update that information in Crisis Track so that it's always pretty accurate, at least for the last year. And that way, when you are conducting a damage assessment operation for IA, for instance, or if you want to share other category C, D, E, and G information, like your information on fire departments, town halls, county courthouse infrastructure, right? So any of your facilities that would fall under category E, if you give us that information, it will be already staged in Crisis Track. So when it's time for you to do a damage assessment of your locally owned properties, it's going to be very accurate and straightforward. Same thing with category G infrastructure. If you've got, some county parks or city level parks with bathroom structures or gazebos and things like that, those are things that we can also add. Same thing for water control infrastructure. So if you've got lift stations or pump stations, those kinds of things, we can add those. So you can see how by thinking about all of your local assets that you might have experienced damages during the course of an incident, by preloading all of that and staging it in Crisis Track, it's just going to make that process a lot easier for you. So we've given you a starting place with the small structure inventory, That again was preloaded. It's part of what you'll find when you log into your account. But with very little effort and also, again, entirely free at no cost to you, you can just get in touch with us. We will ask for a file or access to your GIS if that's something that you have an open data portal. We'll download what we need and we'll stage it in your crisis track account, all as part of the service. So that's something you all can consider. And like I said, Union County has taken us up on it. And if you have questions and want to talk to someone, feel free to reach out. All right, so now is the part of the day that we're actually going to get hands-on. It only took me an hour and a half to get here. So thanks for sticking with me. Let's all go ahead, and if you choose, we're going to log in to the Hughes Training account. So if you go to crisistrack.javari.com, click on sign in. Today only, we're going to enter the username of Hughes Training and the password Storm into the regular box. On every other day that's not today, you're going to go to the bottom of the screen and click on alternate login and use your MySD account. But today and only today, Hughes Training and password is Storm. And I'll actually put that in our chat because I'm going to have to navigate away from this screen while I myself log in. So just give me 1 second here to put that in the chat. Username is Hughes Training and password is Storm. And that's all in lowercase letters, everyone. Okay. So before we get hands-on, are there any questions while I'm hopping over into the account? You all have been a very quiet group today, so I just want to make sure that you all are comfortable chiming in, because the idea really is to share ideas and think about how it might be helpful for you. All right, so here I am logged in. And if you log in with the Hughes Training credential, so again, we're going here to crisistrack.javari.com. We click on sign in. Today only, we're typing in Hughes Training and Storm, and we're submitting. Every other day, we're going to go down to the bottom and use your MySD login. But today, Hughes Training. When you log in, you will see this screen. So again, folks, don't feel pressure. If you do not want to actively participate, that's totally okay. That's what the recording is for. You'll always have an opportunity to come back in. This Hughes County Sandbox is your state's training account. So it's available for your use. If you are super excited about what we talked about today and you want to show someone, you want them to experience it and play around, this is open and available to everyone to use, okay? So as I mentioned, everyone with an administrator credential is going to see the existing incident. We'll be able to create a new incident, and we'll also have access to administrative functions. Our focus today, this morning anyway, is administrative functions. So I'm going to click on that. And all of this, again, is exactly as what we've just been talking about. We talked about creating new users using first the MySD process and then creating a user. Then we talked about the different settings. We've talked about all of the different form types, the public assistance forms, individual assistance forms, and emergency management forms. We talked about how the jurisdictions work, that this is what the county would see, and then cities, towns, and townships would have a slightly different view, but still lots of functionality. We talked about our applicants, whether that's school districts, water districts, fire departments, whoever applicants in our community might be eligible under public assistance program, and how to add them. And then finally, we talked about our structures. I'm just going to click on that to show you an idea of what this looks like. So again, the small structure inventory for Hughes County, there's 90 assets here. Most of them are culverts. You'll see that they all have a rough address here and parcel ID Obviously, there's a lot of fields in this table that are not necessarily applicable to Category C assets. But if you were to provide us with individual residential and commercial assets, we would be able to add them here, and this table becomes, again, much more relevant. We also have the ability to document flood zones, which is maybe helpful for you, and other information. So this is the table that we at Crisis Track will update for you. You don't have to worry about it, but if for whatever reason you wanted to see your assets all mapped out, you would just come up here to the top and click on the map. And each of these yellow dots represents one of those assets. You can click on any one of them just to see the high level information associated with it. If there was some reason why you needed to edit it, you certainly could, but I don't really see that as something that is very frequent, other than maybe you replaced a steel culvert with a concrete culvert, I don't know. So there's very rare situations that you might need to come in and update this information, but most likely this is part of my set it and forget it mindset. Okay, now again, folks, this is all just for information. There's really very few cases you're going to be taking action on the structures. But where I do hope you'll take action, and we're going to talk about it now, is in this plan incident set of information here. The first being we'll talk about our guest users. So remember, the guest users is how we essentially provide mutual aid to each other, with all of you being Crisis Track customers. I can add any of your user IDs just by going to the top left and clicking on new. And I can add any of my friends here that are going to come help me. Once I load your user ID, it's going to allow me to select whether you want to be a user or a viewer. And then that's all there is to it. Then you can tell your friend that they are able to log into Crisis Track on your account, and they would be presented with that option when they log in. Okay, very straightforward. The other thing we have the option to do is add map layers. And map layers are meant to provide you with an additional situational awareness layer. So for instance, we've got a few options here. We have the SD DOT bridge and culvert map. We've got a local roads map viewer. These were loaded in during one of our trainings. So now whenever I have a new incident or I'm interacting with a map, these are going to be options of layers that I can turn on for situational awareness. So perhaps you have some of your own map layers that you want to include. You would go up to the top left, click on new. Maybe the map layer is a layer of sewer lines that you want to include. You would just name it and give it a label. You would include that URL or REST service as they're called, and just put in a few notes about what that map is about. If you save it, it gets added here into our administrative functions, and it would then become available for any incident you create in Crisis Track. So this is where we put some of those widely applicable maps: fire hydrant maps, sewer line maps, maybe your political boundaries if you have different election districts. Maybe you've got patrol zones or something like that for law enforcement, just again, for situational awareness if you wanted to have a map layer. But just again, the key here is anything you provide in this view is going to be applicable and available for every incident you create. Any questions on map layers? All right. So here's the part where we're all going to be hands-on. Everyone ready? I hope so. We're going to click on the pre-configured tasks. Now, pre-configured tasks are essentially our blue skies planning effort. So think about the work that you're always doing. You're always going to have snow removal operation, snow plowing. You're always going to have perhaps just a road clearing, right? Maybe it's one and the same. If you're doing damage assessment, maybe you already have assignments for different parts of your county of who goes where and what infrastructure they're assessing. Think about all of the different things that you might do. Maybe you have sheltering, pre-designated shelters for floods. Maybe you've got some emergency protective measures like clearing storm drains or culverts or whatever it might be. Think about all of the things that are already in your plans, policies, and procedures, things that you're already doing. That's really what the plan incident task module is it's giving you an opportunity to preload all of the things that you're already doing. So that way, when it's time to respond, these are already set up and available for you to apply to that incident in a cafeteria style fashion. So what do I mean by that? Let's think about our spring flood. We know that it was not significant enough that I had to shelter anybody, or at least I don't think it was. But maybe I only had to do damage assessment and some road clearing, and maybe it only hit one part of the county and not another. Well, here are all my different options of things that I've pre-configured. So perhaps only 2 or 3 of these are applicable. That's 2 or 3 things that are already set up and ready for me to go. I don't need to worry about setting them up when it's time to respond. So that's what I mean by having choices. The rest of them would not be applicable, and I just have them there in case I need them. So how do we set this up? What is a task? So again, a task can be any activity that we want to track. It can be debris removal, it can be sheltering, it can be even managing your EOC. If we're tracking our category B hours for EOC personnel, that can be a task. If you are doing any protective measures in advance, those can individually be tasks, right? Tasks can be geographic. Maybe I just have a patrol zone for law enforcement. And we know that law enforcement is going to do a lot of different things during the course of their shift. Maybe they're doing windshield surveys. Maybe they are doing an evacuation. Maybe they are doing traffic control around road closures, right? All of those things are response actions. We don't need to itemize those actions. We can just say, here's patrol zone 1 as a task. And anything that happens within patrol zone 1, we're just going to document it all as one thing. So I always kind of struggle to describe this because everyone's view of a task is a little bit different. So I try to get everyone on the same page. It is not to be confused with a work order system. This is not, go to location XYZ and that is your only task. No, a task is kind of an umbrella bucket of different things that you're going to do over the course of your operational period. So if the task is road clearing, then you would maybe go to several sites over the course of your shift to clear the road. We can document each of those. If your task is damage assessment, we can put in all of those culverts and bridges that you're going to assess during the course of your shift. It's not work order system and it's not a dispatch system. So this is not meant to manage your 911 calls. It's not meant for any of that. Certainly, if you did receive a call to your dispatch center, it was related to a road closure or a request for debris removal or something like that, we can document it in Crisis Track, but this is not meant to replace, your CAD or your dispatching or anything like that. This is really just meant to be a high-level way to organize some of the jobs that you would be doing during your responses. So hopefully that makes sense. So what you see here is how we would go about staging some of that information. You can see from some of our trainings past, your peers across the state have created some various tasks here. And now it's going to be your turn to create a new task. So you might have noticed that every time I say we're going to do something new or we're going to add something, we go to the top left. And in this case, we're all going to click on Add. And you'll notice there's 3 options. We can add new, which is what we're going to do. The second option is we can upload a shape file. So the idea again behind this, folks, is if you already have pre-drawn boundaries for your patrol zones or your response districts or your, highway department, if you already have areas of responsibility that are geographic in nature, and you already have a shapefile that has those boundaries in place, we don't want you to waste time recreating the wheel. Just go ahead and upload that shapefile, and that can be its own task, right? Because patrol zones or highway zones, there's lots of things that happen within the zone on a shift. So it makes sense if you already have some geographic areas in place, that might be one route you wanted to take. The other thing we have is the ability to add a group. And in this case, you'll see here, this damage assessment is a group. This road clearing is a group. So the idea of groups is it's just a way to bunch together like activities. So that's what that's about. You can see we've got some road clearing bunched together here. If we were to create more damage assessment tasks, they would all fall under this category, etc. So let's go ahead and add a new task. This screen is going to pop up, and this is how we add the new task. Now, I've mentioned tasks can be geographic in nature or they could be functional in nature. So all of you get creative now and think about a real task that might be something you encounter at your agency, something that you do all the time. I'm going to call it damage assessment just because this allows me to demonstrate more features, but you can do whatever you want. We're going to give it a name and everyone play along. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to put in a type. So this is a free field and you all can decide what you want that type of task to be. Next, we have the option of including a description. And so I recognize that we're doing this in a blue skies planning effort. So I might not have all of the details, right? Or if I'm doing something geographic, like a patrol zone, where I said it might be traffic control one day or evacuation another day or windshield surveys another day. We don't necessarily know or agree on what the description of the task is going to be because it's, again, blue skies and we don't know what the response has in store for us. And that's totally okay. But what we want to do is kind of give ourselves some breadcrumbs or something to cling to. So that way, when we're seeing this particular task in our list of potential tasks that we can use, that we at least have a clue as to what we intended for it to be. So for me, this is just going to be conduct damage assessment in the southeast corner of the county. And maybe, that's enough. For some of you, you might want to indicate number of resources or equipment that you might want to do that task. You might want to indicate type of damage assessment, whether it's IA or PA, right? So you all can get creative on what kind of information you want there. Same thing with special instructions. The idea of this is meant to mimic your ICS 204 or your unit assignment. So in special instructions, sometimes I'm going to have detour information. I might have a radio channel or communications information. I might have notes about PPE or safety. So again, I'm just leaving myself some breadcrumbs here so that I know when it is time to assign this task that I can come in and provide the correct information or the relevant information related to the task on the day of. If it's something that's like an EOC and it's a static activity, maybe my special instructions are, check in, sign in, bring your meal ticket, whatever it is, however you're tracking your EOC, right? So those things you might already have all the instructions. You don't need to think about it. There's then an option for team. And I'll tell you again, with the damage assessment tier of Crisis Track, teams are not a feature that are enabled. If in the future there's an upgrade to the next tier then teams become a little bit more significant, and that's how we track employees and equipment. But again, for today, that's not quite relevant. The time charge category, if you know that this particular task is associated with one of these categories, you can certainly include it. But if you don't know, or it's kind of a combination of different things, in case of a geographic type task, it's totally okay to leave it blank. Now, if you are a county and you're in the business of being super helpful to your cities, towns, and townships, you can create tasks on behalf of your jurisdictions. So if Minnehaha wanted to create some tasks for Sioux Falls, they could come in here and say, this is a task for Sioux Falls. Obviously, we're in Hughes County for our example. So if the county wanted to make this task relevant for Pierre, they would click on Pierre and it would show up in Pierre's account. That's optional, but it's a feature that you may wish to take advantage of. Now let's talk about how to actually draw some geographies or geometries on the map. The next thing is task area. Now, if I click on draw, it gives me 5 options, different types of polygons or lines that I want to draw. My favorite is polygon. It gives me the most control and the most freedom to draw. Now, since this is a damage assessment task that I'm creating, I probably want to turn on my structures so that I can see where my assets are. Now, this is obviously not required. If you are not creating a task that has assets with it, you don't need to see your structures. It doesn't matter. Likewise, if you're creating a task that has no geographic area, like an EOC task, you don't need to create a task area. So I don't want you all to mistake my examples as must do or absolutes. I'm just trying to show you the most features and give you the best understanding of the software. So if it's not applicable to the task that you're creating, don't worry about it. But for mine, it's a damage assessment task, and I'm gonna do damage assessment of this part of the county. So I just come in here and I draw my little polygon. And there it is. There's my little polygon. If I don't like it, I can come back in and clear out that polygon and draw it again. Now it allows me to assign structures. So again, if you are doing snow removal, structures are not relevant. So maybe the area that you've drawn is relevant, but structures don't make sense. So use your judgment. Again, this is not an absolute. But since I am doing damage assessment, I have 2 options here. I could either use the whole task area, and what it's doing is it's recognizing all of the infrastructure in that boundary. There's 24 culverts and bridges there. Or if I only want to assign a subset of those 24 bridges, rather than using the whole task area, I can come in and say select structures. Again, it's giving me the option to draw something. So maybe I only want, this eastern portion. And you'll notice here it has chosen 18 of those structures. Okay, so again, the idea here is we're coming up with our task. We're deciding whether or not it has a geographic boundary that we want to draw, and if it has structures that we'd like to assign. Not every task is going to have boundaries or structures, and that's okay. Now it's asking us which form we want to apply. So again, folks, keep in mind, the only things that we currently have in here are bridges and culverts. So if we put a damage assessment form, it's going to default to the proper form, whether it's a bridge damage or culvert damage form. If you choose to add additional structures, like Union County has, you would be able to use these filters to take out residential and commercial, or add in, buildings, whatever the categories are. Crisis Track is smart enough to apply the proper form to the proper structure type. Okay. So now that I'm applying my damage assessment form, or I could be selective and I could just say, I want to just use the culvert form, whatever I want to do. The last options I have here are to limit the forms. So again, you know your community best. The idea of limiting the forms is to make life simple for the end user. If you have a crew that already is going to be, a little bit questioning the use of Crisis Track, maybe we want to make their life super easy and only give them, bridges and culverts damage forms. That's all we want them to do is bridges and culverts. But maybe you have a group that is really dialed in and has a lot of capabilities, and you want them to be able to document anything and everything that they come across. You want them to tell you about road closures. You want them to tell you about public damages and individual and household damages. Then you don't limit them and let them have choice of all of the different forms we're offering you. You decide. This is your decision. And it's not set in stone. And I should have said that earlier. Nothing that we do in Crisis Track is absolute set in stone. Even though we're here in our admin functions, we're pre-configuring things, we're thinking ahead. Even in the midst of your response, you can still update things. You can still change people's user permissions. You can still modify structures in the structure table. You can still change these tasks, okay? I don't want anyone to think that, oh my goodness, I have to get it right the first time. You don't. It's all very flexible for you, and it can be incident specific. I just encourage you all just to start and to try, okay? Because we all know in the field of emergency management, you have a plan, so what? Nothing ever goes according to the plan, right? We have to be flexible, and that's what Crisis Track is built for. So we decide, do we limit the forms, yes or no? And then finally, we decide, is this a task that falls under a group, or do we want to create a new group, whatever the case may be. So now hopefully you all are playing along. We're happy with our task. We're going to save it. And you'll see that my task has now appeared here as damage assessment zone 2. And I can use my magnifying glass to come in here and look at it. Later on, if I want to edit it, I can edit it. It will take me back to that screen. Or if I decide I just don't need that task anymore, I can delete it. But hopefully everyone's playing along, and we're going to get a few more of you to provide some of your tasks. So the other things that we can do here, we can export a shapefile with all of our different tasks that we've created. And we can also see here in the middle a table of all of the different tasks that we've created. Why is this helpful? Well, again, here's all those descriptions. So we can see things more in a written versus visual map. Okay. Any questions on creating a pre-configured task? All right, now I'm going to show you why it's relevant. We're going to go back to our administrative functions. And you'll notice the one thing I haven't talked about yet is our incidents. So now we can all go ahead and click on incidents. And what you'll notice here is we've created lots and lots of test incidents, and I'm going to have you play along. This table represents all the incidents past of our make-believe training. So you'll see, as with all tables in Crisis Track, if I click on the headers, I can sort any of these columns. You can see all of them have the ability to view the task and edit the task and delete the task. I will tell you that I'm very much against deleting tasks, even if they are just test incidents, or I'm sorry, deleting incidents. Because we like to see where we've come from, right? If we're doing exercises or training, we want to see what we've done in the past. If it is truly an incident that we're tracking damages for, even if it doesn't rise to the level where we're getting PA for it, it's still important for us to look back on how we organized that incident, maybe have it available to look at trends. Maybe there's a particular area of flooding that we thought was not problematic, but now we're starting to see it's becoming a problem. We're able to see that with our past incidents, right? So I'm very strongly against deleting any incident. And that's why we have this status of closed. We want to have active and closed incidents. And having an active incident is what your field user is going to be able to select when it's time to collect information. So you see that here in my list, everything is closed except my training incident. And that's by design, because I don't want to confuse people when it's time to log in and use Crisis Track, right? We only want the one option to be obvious. This is the incident we're talking about today. But we know in real life, you might have overlapping incidents. You might have a storm that starts in the spring that you're still working on, which might be the case for, my friend Jeff in Hand County. And then you might have a summer storm that comes through, or a tornado or something, right? So we know that it's likely that you'll have more than one open at a time, and that's okay. But again, the best practice, folks, is when you're actively collecting information, let's try to keep it limited to only the most active incidents. So let's go ahead and create a new incident. Again, top left, that's where the new button is. And we're going to go ahead and walk through what we call our incident wizard. So the first thing we're going to do is give it a name. So it could be any name you want. And you all can decide that. If it's a named storm, obviously it makes sense to give it the same name as the storm. If it's a pre-planned event, maybe you've got some sort of festival or something that you're using Crisis Track to manage your road closures, whatever you want it to be. We have the status, again, active or closed. So if it's a planned event that hasn't happened yet, you might want to keep it closed until the day of the incident, or keep it active, whatever works for you. We have the types, and this is primarily based on FEMA's long list of bad things that can happen. So you can find whatever type that you're pretending this will be. For tests and exercises, I generally will choose other. The date is going to default to today's date, but again, you can select something from the past or something in the future. It gives you an option for your disaster number, which you're not going to have in most cases the day that you're creating the incident. So you can always update that later. And the reason you would update it later is because filling in that field is going to populate into some of your FEMA PDA forms, or excuse me, PA forms later on. So that's just going to save you time from manual typing later on. The applicant ID, that is something that if you already have it, feel free to add it in. It's not required, but again, could be helpful for you to save some time when you're filling in forms later. And then finally, the description. So we want to be as descriptive as possible, because what is provided here is all the information that your field user is going to get on their mobile app. So we want to set them up for success. Let's be as specific as possible. So again, everyone playing along, go ahead and make up an incident. We had some really creative people in the past who had zombie apocalypses and nuclear detonations and alien visits and all sorts of fun things. So feel free to be creative and make this a little bit fun. When I'm happy with my incident information, I click on next. You'll notice the population here. Where did that come from? Well, it came from the settings, and that's where we've added the 2020 census data. You'll notice the county FEMA factor or your per capita indicator, 4.44. That's something that Crisis Track is always going to keep tabs on. Whenever FEMA changes that number, we will automatically update that for you. So when you get to this screen, it should always be accurate. If for whatever reason it's not accurate, certainly you can manually change it, but recall that this is how we're calculating the per capita indicator thresholds. And if it is inaccurate, please let us know, send us an email and we want to fix it, okay? The next thing we'll do is tasks. You'll notice at the top, there's a box checked for create a default task. I encourage you to always leave that box checked. That's kind of a catch-all task. So if you don't have time in your EOC to set up a specific task for whatever it is you're doing, by leaving that box checked, it at least gives you a starting point. Now below, you'll see this list of pre-configured tasks. These are all of the different tasks that we've created just a moment ago or in previous trainings. And this is where I have that cafeteria style selection. So I can say, you know, for my incident that's happening today, you know, all of my damage assessment tasks are relevant, and so are all my road clearing tasks. You know, maybe none of these others are relevant. So that's all I have to do. Or maybe, you know, even within one, well, only zone 1 is relevant. And so I can just leave zone 1 checked. Okay. That's why it's so much better to have these pre-configured, because I don't need to create any of this. It's already created and I just check a few boxes. Next, there's nothing here, but if we had put in some guest users, right? Maybe we have our neighbors queued up, we can add them right from here from the beginning to allow them access to our incident. And then next we have the map layers. So again, if I had added my fire hydrants and my sewer lines and my whatever election districts, all of those I can decide, you know, yes, for this particular incident, maybe only my flood and my bridges and culvert layers are applicable. And so I can turn off the ones that are not applicable. Then I click on finish, and it's going to create my new incident. And you'll see it there at the top listed as active. Now, let's assume that, and hopefully everyone else, I'm seeing a few car show, thank you. What else we've got here? Public Works storm test, great, June flooding, and so on. So good job, people playing along. But what I want you to do is pretend the incident is over and we're not collecting information anymore. What should I do? Well, remember, my best practice is that I want to change the status. So I want everyone to go back in from this table, and we're going to click on edit. And when we click on edit, this is where we would have the ability to change the status and close that incident. So everyone who's just created an incident, please go in and update your status to closed and save that. And now the status should be closed. Great. Thanks, everyone. Y'all are super fast. Okay, so the only incident that should be open is my training incident, and it is. Last time somebody thought they'd be funny and they closed my incident on me, and it was very embarrassing because I didn't know what was happening, but thank you for not closing my test incident. So that's how we create new incidents. Now, before we take our break, I'm going to tell you there's something else about creating incidents. You can just do it from the home screen. So remember, we came into administrative functions, we clicked incidents, we clicked on new, and that's fine. The other way we can do it is we can just be here on the home screen. You know, maybe it's a no notice incident and I just want to get started. So from here, I just click on create and the same exact incident wizard is going to appear. Now, the other thing I'll tell you is, again, we're having a no notice incident. I don't have time to think about this and that. I don't have time to be assessing which of my tasks are applicable and which ones aren't. So what I can do is I can just name my incident. And if I just click finish, it's going to create an incident for me with all of the default settings. And you'll see it's going to make that incident the top thing in the list. So again, if all I've got is a fire chief in my EOC who has commander level access, fire chief can just go ahead, create the incident, and leave it to me to come in later as an administrator and fill in all the blanks later, okay? We want to make this very easy and user-friendly. So that's something that you all can do. Are there any questions about any of these administrative functions? Because we're pretty much done talking about this now. So any last remarks or questions? All right. I've got 11:02. What I'm going to do is have you come back at 10 after. And when you come back, we're still going to be hands-on, but what we're going to be doing is working on incident management. So I'm going to pause the recording, come back at 10 after, and we will continue on. Thanks, everyone. Is now the incident management portion. So when we are talking about crisis track, again, we know that there's a lot of information here. And we're trying our best to tailor it specifically to your needs and even more so to public assistance. But when I go over the next modules, I just want you to think about, again, how you're already doing business. We're not asking you to change that. We're just going to support how you're documenting things. So all of the features I'm going to talk about are not necessarily things you need to master. They might not even be things that you're going to use in your EOC. So just think about them as potentials of ways that you might enhance your operation. And then just things that are an opportunity for you. So again, just quick here on the high level before we get hands-on again. When we go into our incident, which is the Crisis Track Training 2023 incident, we again are going to find a similarly organized set of modules. The top row is all things that we call configure. And the idea behind those is that if you were someone that organizes your EOC in the traditional ICS format, where you have operations, planning, finance, logistics, the things that we see in the configure section are generally the realm of our operations folks. They're the ones who are coming up with the tasks, the resource assignments, etc. That second row, the view row, is generally the world of our planning and intelligence section. People who are responsible for situational awareness or putting together sit-stat reports or gathering data to share with your executives and decision makers and elected officials. That's generally what that second row is. And then the last row, export, that's where all of the entries are. And that's generally the world for our finance and administration folks who are coming in after the fact, kind of doing the cleanup, making sure that everything is properly documented. They're the ones that are going to also be helping with the PA process potentially. So that's really how we have it organized. And again, everyone, for today, we're using the Hughes training account to practice this. But when you're in your own accounts, feel free to create your own test incidents so that you can practice with some of your local data. We are going to go through all of the modules one by one, but before I get there, I just wanted to do another reminder here about how the jurisdictions, if you were to create one, looking at you, Minnehaha and Sioux Falls, within our incident module, we would have the jurisdictions setting here. All of your cities, towns, and townships, again, would appear. If you had given access to your cities, what you'll see on the right screen is what they will then have access to. So you'll notice it's pretty much the same, just a little bit different. So again, they still have a lot of local ability to manage their incident. And so again, all incidents starting local, perhaps Sioux Falls has something hyper local. Maybe the river is doing a little bit of flooding and they just want to track it for local purposes. Maybe it's not going to rise to a countywide affair, but they just want to document it. They certainly can do that and manage it all at the local level. Okay. So let's switch over into our incident. Again, from this screen, this is our home screen. We spent all of our time before in administrative functions. Now we're going to go into our existing incident, our Crisis Track Training 2023. Everyone should be here with me if you're playing along. And now we're going to go through module by module, and that will take us through the end of our time together. So let's first look at the footprint. The idea of the footprint is to give us, especially early on in our response, some situational awareness. Now, if you click here on the left-hand side, you'll see that I've got some initial damage reports, which is equivalent to a windshield survey. Remember, we talked about that earlier. And I also have the ability to turn on my structures. So let's put ourselves in this concept of maybe we're anticipating some flooding. And maybe, again, as someone who has been through flooding before, I know that this part of town always floods. It's always going to flood in this area. What I can do is, in advance of my flood, I can come in here and draw what we call an area of concern. And in advance of this actual flood happening, I'm able to map it out, and it's going to give me some high-level information that I can use for planning purposes or to inform my executives or elected officials. So what I mean by that is I can come in into stats, and just based on this geometry that I've drawn, again, make believe, but pretend that this is the area that always floods. Based on that area, I know that I have 12 structures in it. Now, again, these are the structures that I've added to Crisis Track. So if all we're using is that small, small structure inventory, then those are the only 12 structures I'm going to see. If you follow the path of Union County and you want to add in your residential, commercial, and other facilities, obviously this number is going to be more accurate. Then we would have the ability to see what that structure value is. So again, especially important if we're talking about residential and commercial. If I already have some things documented in there, whether they're windshield surveys or damages already, I can easily see how many of those entries we've got created. We would be able to see a damage amount and then also an area in square miles just based on that geometry. So this is a helpful tool for you early on in the response to be able to determine potential for impact. Or alternatively, what we're going to do now is we're going to create an area of concern based on reported information. So perhaps your highway folks or your law enforcement or fire crews are already out doing initial damage reports, windshield surveys, and that's what's represented by all these little eye bubbles. So maybe I'm starting to notice a trend. Maybe, these areas are affected by something, some hazard. What I can do is I can come in and I'm going to go to the top left. I can add an area of concern, or alternatively, I can upload shapefile or GeoJSON. Those things are map-based files that sometimes would be provided by somebody like National Weather Service if they have a mapping product of some straight line winds or tornado path, or maybe from creek monitoring, they might have some sort of file that they're willing to share. But generally, very specific situation for those to be available. So we're just going to create an area of concern from scratch. And again, folks, play along, name it whatever you'd like. Janelle's area of concern. And this could be, based on windshield surveys. And now it allows me to draw a geometry. You'll see again, different options here. We have a circle, maybe you have a hazmat. I remember there was a great presentation at the conference last fall where your friends in Iowa talked about a train derailment with hazardous material spill. Maybe they would have drawn a circle around their train derailment versus a polygon. But, we have all these different options. So I'm just going to come in and I'm going to say, yep, this is my general vicinity area of concern. I'm going to put a little geometry around this. If it's not quite right, I can edit it and change the points, maybe a little bit more tied in here. You get the idea. You can make it as interestingly shaped as you'd like. When I'm happy with that, I click on save. And now you'll just see it's now added here to my list of things. If I click on the stats, again, you'll notice that we've got entries in that particular area with damage amounts and roughly the square mileage of that area. Okay, so go ahead if you choose to create some areas of concern. I see a few of you playing along. That's great. The idea here, situational awareness, giving us some high-level information. With any of our maps, though, we're going to have some common features. If you come to the right, we have tools. So you can configure layers, right? So if you had included your fire hydrants and sewer lines, you can manage those. You can print this particular map, maybe for your PIO or a press release or something. You can search for structures, and that's going to query that structure table we talked about. We also have a variety of base maps here. So every hazard might require a slightly different base map. We have topographic maps if you're dealing with floods or different elevations. We have street maps if you are doing evacuation, maybe. We have a satellite view if you're needing to determine whether or not there's structures in a particular place, etc. Any questions on our areas of concern? One other thing we can do, I'll quickly mention, if you can add an annotation. So maybe you have an incident command post in a particular place, maybe it's over here. I can add that. And now that's just another annotation that's available for me. Maybe I've got a shelter somewhere else. And so these are just little cues that as I'm doing planning or coming up with some situational awareness, I've got these reference points. Maybe I've got a staging area for heavy equipment, whatever it is. Okay. And I can draw, even a polygon if my staging area is kind of a big fairground or something like that. So that's the area of concern. It's all for analysis, situational awareness, helping us plan, helping us understand the scope and extent. Now we're back, we're looking at tasks. This should be familiar. We just spent 15 minutes talking about this an hour ago. The tasks, again, are buckets that we use to organize all of the activities that are happening, either by geography, by function, even by operational period. If I want to have an AM task and a PM task, whatever it is that you want to do. When you come into this module, it's arranged as a table. Again, you can always sort the table by the headers. You can edit, copy, delete, and change the jurisdiction for a task. We can add a new task. And how we do that, always again at the top left, click on add. What options do we have? Well, we can create a new task. That's the just-in-time task that we're creating specific for this incident. We can upload shapefiles or GeoJSONs again. So if I did in fact have a tornado and I want to only do damage assessment in the boundaries of the tornado that National Weather Service has provided to me, rather than start from scratch, I can just upload those boundaries and create my task from there. We also have the option of pre-configured tasks. Remember, we spent so much time in our blue skies planning to come up with all of the things that possibly could happen. Well, now that I'm in my incident, if I didn't already add it as part of the incident creation, this is how I can always go back and say, you know what, I did in fact need this particular BIA tribal coordination element. So I can just go ahead and add it. And now they're there in my table. And I haven't had to do any work. It's just there and done for me, right? So you can see the value of pre-configuring things because it's going to save you time on the day of the actual incident. But let's go ahead and refresh our skills on how to create a new task. We go to the top left, click on new task, and you're going to notice this is very similar to what we've just done on the pre-configuring side. So let's all play along again. Think about a task that you might want to include for this incident. And you can go ahead and name it, give it a type. But now that we're actually in the incident, we have a few options. We can give it a status. And this is a pretty interesting feature, especially if we're doing operational planning for the next period. If I am planning ahead, following my IAP, my planning P process, right? Everyone's favorite thing. And I'm trying to set up my objectives and my teams and tasks for tomorrow. I can create it in advance and then just have it as holding. And so tomorrow, when that team shows up and they're about to go do the snow removal, I can update the status to active. Or when they're done with their shift, I can come in and close it. So this gives us the opportunity to track the different statuses for each of our tasks, which you can imagine if you've got a pretty long storm period and a protracted response, you could go through several days of different activities. As before, it's going to default to today's date. You could pre or post date it. As before, we're going to give it special instructions. We're always going to be descriptive because now we're actually in the incident, right? It's not hypotheticals anymore. We actually know what's happening. So we're going to be super descriptive. And we're also going to provide very specific instructions related to special considerations, especially if it's safety related. Here again, we have the option to limit the forms that we want associated with this task. If we want to narrow the focus, we can be selective and only give certain ones. If we want to be very broad and give our field users lots of options to document lots of different things, we just leave it the way it is. Okay. Now I save it. And here's the part where we're drawing on the map. Now, who can remember? Is it absolutely necessary to draw a task area? Hopefully lots of you are saying, no, it's not necessary. But certainly if we wanted to, I can come in here with my draw tool on the right-hand side, and I can select any number of my drawing tools, and I can go ahead and create an area. Now, if I wanted to assign structures, is it absolutely necessary for every task to have structures? Hopefully a lot of you are shaking your head, no, it's not necessary for every task to have structures. But if I wanted to, I come up here to the Assign Structures option on the top left. I click on that, and I'm going to want my structures enabled so I can actually see where all the structures are, right? For this example, it's all your small structures, bridges and culverts. If you go the way of Union County and you want to include residential and commercial and other facilities, using these filters is going to allow you to focus in on just the structure types that you might be concerned about. Okay, so if you're creating different tasks for different structure types, right, it makes sense. Highway people are going to look at bridges and culverts. Building department people would look at residential and commercial. We're not going to mix those two tasks together, so we can filter out the structures that aren't applicable. So I come over, I look at this particular task area, and I can say, yes, I want all of the structures in that task area to be assigned. Or just as before, I can say, no, I only want a subset of the structures in this area assigned. So you decide. But a good rule of thumb, just to keep in mind, and I'm not too worried about you all in the current state, but in the future state, if you add more structures, we want to limit the number of structures we assign to 500 or fewer. And the rationale is because, realistically, 500 structures is just a lot for anyone to realistically accomplish. We want to have our SMART objectives, right? And secondly, from a technical perspective, more than 500 structures in a task is kind of slowing things down. That's a lot of data to manage on the technical side of the app, especially when we start adding photos and other details. So we just want to be keeping things simple and limiting the number of structures to 500 or fewer. So again, as before, I can either go with the default damage assessment, and Crisis Track will be smart enough to apply the proper form to it. In this case, it's homogeneous, that they're all culverts. So I can say, okay, I want to apply the culvert form to each of those. And when I assign it, you'll notice that they all turn blue. That is what they look like once they've been assigned. So you'll see tomorrow, as we go through all the different field user form and collection of that information, that this map will update to different colors once we start getting damages reported. But right now, all assigned structures will appear as a blue icon. Now, a lot of people will say, that's great, and we're going to put people out in the fields and they're going to collect things, and that's great. But what if we happen to have a whole bunch of structures or entries that or maybe undamaged? Do I have to go in on a one-by-one individual basis and update each one to say no damage, no damage? Well, that's up to you. If that's a requirement of your agency and you want to have the documentation with photos and all those things, you can do that. But if you have a few resources or lacking the time, or maybe you had private property owners helping you out and checking things out on your behalf, whatever it is, and they're just reporting in. If we click on the edit entries feature up here on the top, this allows us to do a bulk edit operation, which means rather than individually updating each and every one of my assigned structures, I can come in and select a subset. So I'm just going to pick these two, or four, I guess there's four there. And I can come in and I can click on bulk edit entries here on the right. And what will happen is it's going to come over and allow me to enter any sort of information. So I can just say no damages. And I can put in the notes, maybe verified by Inspector Gadget, and the cost estimate is going to be $0 because there's no damages there. And maybe, Inspector Gadget's phone number, we're going to put in there. So for all four of these entries, when I save it, it's going to change. It's going to change the icon. And when I look at it, I will see that all of the information I just provided is going to be applicable to all of the entries that were there. Okay. So this is one way for us to be more efficient if we need to. Other things we can do with that bulk edit feature, rather than edit the entries, I could copy them. So I could draw a geometry around this group, and maybe this group of culverts, in addition to me doing a damage assessment on it, maybe I'm also going to document debris. Maybe all of them are super clogged up with, I don't know, vegetation, and we need to have a debris removal operation there. Well, rather than start from scratch, I could just come in, select those entries, copy them, and now I have a debris form I'm going to fill out. Other things I can do is I could delete those entries. Maybe they were duplicates, or maybe, I don't know, they were assigned an error, or maybe I'm going to assign it rather than this task. Maybe I'm going to change the task and give it to another task to do. Or maybe one of my jurisdictions is going to take responsibility for it, and I can assign them as a group to one of my jurisdictions. So those are some of the other options that I can do in bulk to help manage this task. We're trying to create efficiencies for you, so that way you're not having to, again, do chicken scratch on a piece of paper. We're trying to make it so that you can manage all these things at one time from the comfort of your office, rather than out in the field. But truthfully, this is the hardest part of Crisis Track from the incident management side. If you can think about how you want to organize your tasks and how you build them, if you can master that, then you've really mastered Crisis Track. This is the hardest thing that we'll ask you to do. Other cool things that you can do from here. We have some tools that weren't on the other screen. We have a measure tool. This can come in really handy. Maybe you have a fence line, or that the culvert extends from like one driveway to another. You could essentially start your measurement and end your measurement right here from the computer to get the units of measurement. You have feet and some other units here, but the distance. So if I'm trying to estimate, how much of my roadway was impacted, and I have landmarks or whatever it is, I can use this measuring tool to get a measurement, and then I can estimate all of my project work from there. So that's really helpful. The other thing that's helpful here, we've got, again, the ability to search for addresses or structures, and the ability to configure your map layers. So if you did include, again, fire hydrants, sewer lines, etc., you can configure those if you need to. Again, the map settings, all the different base maps, whatever you need, all available. When we're done with our setting up our task, if we go to the entries screen, we'll just see all of those entries we've assigned in a table format. So that just allows us to, again, see as the damages come in, we see the statuses that we can update. We can see reports if we want to download a report. This is not necessarily for FEMA purposes, this is for internal use. But if you had a need to have paper reports, if there were photos or whatever it is that was associated with each of these locations, all of it would be included in this little downloadable report. You also have the ability to change individual entries to different tasks. So if, for instance, I got overwhelmed and I needed to share some of the wealth with one of my partners on a different assignment, I could do that. And then here again is an option. Maybe I only needed to copy one particular entry. Like I said, maybe this is a debris issue now. The culvert was full of vegetation. I can go ahead and copy that culvert. And now you'll notice it's a debris form that I've just created. Okay, so those are some of the administrative things that we can do to manage this incident straight from the tasks module. Are there any questions with that? I know that one's a little bit more complex. So hopefully some of you have created some tasks along with me and you've been playing along. It doesn't look like too many, just a few. Okay, good. Thank you for playing along. The other thing we can do from the tasks is to export all these as shape files. So if you had some reason to take all of this and put it into a different platform, maybe a CAD or work order system or something else, you could do that. All right, we're going to wrap up here. We have a few more things to talk about before we're done for today. The guest users, this should sound familiar. The functionality works the same. Remember, we talked about this is your friend from the neighboring county. If you had included people to support you and during our incident setup, they would already appear in this list. If you had a surprise guest who surprised you and came out of the woodwork to help you out, we can add them by going to the top left, and we can click on new, and the same rule applies. You just put in their MySD user ID and load it. Or we can again go back to our pre-configured list if we had added all those names in advance, and all of them would be there, and we would just have them from a list to add cafeteria style. The next module is our information module. This is one that is not available at the jurisdiction level. So sorry, Sioux Falls, you're not going to have this button, but all the counties will. But essentially, this is where we store our links to do our URL for damage assessments. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, but this is essentially where you would find that link if you needed it in a hurry. And this is also where we give you the option to create specific forms for your applicants. So let's assume for a moment that my school district had some damage to the high school. Well, instead of me creating a whole user ID and having them go through the MySD process, maybe instead of, setting them up within a jurisdiction, all I wanted to do is come in here and say, you know what, I want you to report your building damage. So I select the building damage form. And while I'm doing this, watch what happens to this URL just below. Fill in your building damage form. I want it to be, my school district. And I want that information to go into damage assessment zone 1. And yes, I want the school district to be able to provide me photos. As I've changed all these fields, this link has changed, and it's kind of a crazy link, right? It's created a very, very specific link that if I click on it, is going to be available for my school district to populate. And this is pretty much what we'll talk about tomorrow for your cities, towns, and townships. But it's creating a personalized link that your school district or whoever applicant you include can use to report damages directly into Crisis Track. So all you'd have to do is you just send them this in an email, and they would be able to fill in the information, and it's going to automatically come to you. So again, trying to create efficiency in your process. The last thing here is another place that we can manage map layers. So you'll notice those three are the ones that we came up with in our administrative functions. But if you had an incident specific map layer, maybe you're dealing with a wildfire if you're out in the western part of the state, and the fire folks provide you with a boundary map. You can add that boundary map here, but it's going to stay only related to this incident. It's not going to be available next fire season. It's only in this incident if you add it here. If you want a map to be available all the time and for all future sake, we add those to the administrative side. So hopefully that's clear. All right, so we just covered those features. Again, folks, footprint, situational awareness, task is how we're grouping together our activities, and then guest users and info is more just kind of administrative. Now we'll talk about our operations view. The operations view, and again, feel free to get hands-on here. This is how we are visually representing everything going on with our response. And it is a busy map because we've been playing with it for several different trainings now. So you'll see on the left, we have what's called the legend. And right now it's organized by task. So you can see within Hughes County, I've got all these different tasks, right? These are what we created. These are what you saw in that task module in that table. And within each of those, you can see I've got all the different forms that have been filled in and their affiliated icons. I can unselect all this and make life a little simpler, and then just turn on tasks that are relevant to me. Why is this important to know? Well, if I come over to tools, I can do all sorts of printing and configuring. And if I'm trying to create a product for my PIO or for a presentation for my elected officials or for my Chamber of Commerce or whatever it is, I want to be able to represent information appropriate to the audience, right? So that's what all these little boxes are. Whether you're printing something or just maintaining situational awareness in your EOC, you can play with all these, turn them on, turn them off. If I wanted to see my jurisdictions, I can turn those on and off. So if Minnehaha and Lincoln were trying to see what Sioux Falls is up to, they would be able to turn these on and off and see specifically the different things that Sioux Falls is doing. Same thing with my area of concern. Remember, these were for situational awareness. There may or may not be, anything happening there. I can turn those on and off just if I need to have that overlap of what's happening for situational awareness. Same thing with all my annotations. Maybe I don't really care where my shelters are, or maybe the staging area is not necessarily part of my public information release, right? So I can turn those off. So this is just one way to see all the information. The other way I can select is by form. So this makes things a little simpler, right? Maybe all I care about is road closures. I only want to see where the road closures are. In that case, all I need to do is turn on my road closures layer, and now that's all that's on the map. Maybe I only care about my culverts, and maybe even within my culverts, I only care about, those that might have damages. I can even filter that down more if I want to. The other feature that we can have on this screen is our charts. So I just came over here on the top left to turn that on. And you can see there's a running tally of all of the damages by category that I've recorded so far. you can see the threshold, that's 78,876. That's that per capita indicator, right? The population times 4.44. And you can see the little red line, that was where my threshold is. And, it's a sad, busy day here in Hughes County. We've got lots and lots of damages. So you can see here how easy it is to have a tally of those damages live. So the minute you hit that threshold, we're going to call Amanda up and all her friends at SDOEM and let them know. Now, if you were using it for individual assistance, we would have residential damages and commercial damages here broken out by affected, minor, major, and destroyed, along with the total estimated damages. And then at the bottom, we've got a pie chart that represents how many assessments have been completed, or entries rather, that are completed. So that includes your road closures, that includes your debris, all that, versus what's been assigned. And so that's helpful if you're trying to advocate for more resources, right? Perhaps you're asking for more help. People need to be on overtime shift and you need to justify why that is. Well, you can say we're only halfway done and the state, we're on our 72-hour deadline. We need more people to come do these assessments. So this is to help you make some of those resource decisions. All right. There's a lot here, right? A lot to slice and dice, a lot to analyze, really good information. Now, I also have our charts view, so I'm going to click on that. And you'll notice this top row is exactly what I just showed you on the operations view, right? It is a summary of all of the damages throughout the county. But what this module allows me to do is to see that breakdown. Remember, I talked about the cities, towns, and townships below. So if, here in Hughes County, what's in this row is all of the damages recorded in the unincorporated area. Now I have Pierre, and if Pierre was using it, or if the county was recording damages on Pierre's behalf in their jurisdiction, now we get to see what those damages are specific to that jurisdiction. It's included in my total, but I'm seeing it on a line item basis. The same thing with Rayburn Township. So this again, folks, is even if you are not providing access to your cities, towns, and townships, you at the county level are able to attribute damage to the various levels of government in the proper place so that you can really see all of the applicants and where they stand. So that's just the charts view. If you'll notice, we have a table view as well. So you can see this information. Right now it's on the residential, which we're not currently using, but if I go to the PA IDA details, here again, you'll see these line items for each of your cities, towns, and townships, each of the categories, the totals, etc. So again, very, very good information without any work on your part. It's all here. It's all automated. If you're in the field filling in the forms, it's going to just automatically populate all this. So even if it's not the state asking you for the information, I'm sure at the local level, you've got a lot of people who are really eager to know what's happening with regard to these damages. We also have the PA applicant summary. So this is where you'll see our hospital, our school district, right? Any of those extras that you might have added in that are not cities, towns, and townships. It's kind of the same breakdown on that line item basis. And of course, you can export this here on the top left. Any questions on our charts? All right, we're nearing the end. The next module is our documents. Documents are things that are snapshots in time. So these are not going to update automatically. And it's important for you to know that because if you're in the midst of an operation, data is still coming in. You want to be thoughtful about when you're populating these documents. And let's take a look and see what we have available. If I go to the top left and click on Add, we're going to see a window pop up with all these different document options. A lot of them are FEMA related. And I know, Jason probably is happy to see those there. But we have some basic things like our damage inventories, which I'm going to click on. And this might be familiar to a lot of you. This is one that I hear a lot in my on-site trainings where people are asking about, the spreadsheets for the grants portal. Well, this probably looks very familiar for you. And if you take a look at it, you'll notice that a lot of the fields are pre-populated and a lot of them aren't. And that's just because of how haphazard we've been with, playing and experimenting. But you'll see all of the fields here are by category, the type of damage or the facility name, addresses, lat longs, all of these things would be pre-populated if we're using the software. Then we have our damage descriptions. All of that is pulled straight out of the entries. We would update the causes of the damage. But here you'll see all the costs are pre-populated. If we had percentage of the work complete at the time of submission, we can update that. We've got our labor types, right? All of these things, folks, are things that if we had included them in the entries are going to be populated here in the form. Otherwise, we can always come back in and manually update. But this is still a huge improvement over having to manually manage spreadsheets and update all those things because, again, we're working on an entry by entry basis. All of that information is going to pull in and you're not going to have to do work twice. That's the goal. So if I want to keep this, I would save it. I would give it a name and potentially a date because I have the ability to update this particular one by coming in here and saying view. Maybe I'm updating something. And when I save it, it's going to allow me to either overwrite or create a new version. So if I overwrite it, you'll see I have now multiple versions along with the date and timestamp that it was updated and who made the updates. So all of the forms available here in this library can be managed the same way. You've got the ability to populate a lot of these. And again, the key is that it's a snapshot in time. So if I'm doing just for the sake of experimentation, running one of these documents today, but I know my field crew is still out there collecting damages till tomorrow, I'm probably going to need to redo this form and update the version. Okay, so just know that. Jurisdictions we've already talked about, but just for the sake of it, I'll just go into RABER. So if you're the county and you're working on behalf of a jurisdiction, you would click on that jurisdiction and you can then manage tasks just like you would at the county level. You can manage guest users on their behalf. You can run documents just at that county, or excuse me, jurisdictional level. So basically all of the things that you can do at the county level, the jurisdiction, if you give them access, will see only these things, like in the case of Sioux Falls. Or if you're doing it on their behalf, you would come into each jurisdiction and you would know it because it would be red. The difference here, though, is the footprint is not quite as interactive at the jurisdictional level. It's more meant for the county level, and we're working on adding a little bit more teeth to this for the jurisdictional level. But for now, this is what the jurisdiction would see. Okay. We're going to spend our last 5 minutes talking about the entries, and then if there are questions, I haven't seen any coming through on the chat, and y'all have been a quiet group today, but certainly I would want to make sure to accommodate questions. But if I click on entries, you'll notice here in the bottom that we have 74 entries. So the entries is all encompassing of all of everything that we've done, whether it's damage assessment, road closures, debris, emergency protective measures, everything that we've done and created an entry for, it's going to appear in this list. So obviously that's a lot of information. And I know that Jeff in Hand County can probably talk to you about how he managed this information. But again, with all of our tables, you can sort them. You can sort by timestamps, by status, etc. You can view each of these entries straight from here. And if there's any photos, you can see the photos, you can see all of the information. You can edit that entry. So if you're doing quality assurance and you're coming in and making sure that the information provided is accurate, you can just do those edits straight from here. Maybe you had some documents or videos that you want to attach. You can attach them here under attachments. You can, change the status. Perhaps that road was blocked. Now it's only partially blocked because we removed some of the debris. I can save it, etc. So that's pretty helpful. We can also change tasks. So if we had, some entries that weren't assigned to anything, I can also assign them from here if I wanted to. I can see all these entries on the map. I can see a history of every entry here. So every update, every change that's been made. I've got a log of all of that along with the different versions. So again, this is really going to allow for accountability. And I also have a quality assurance feature here that will allow me to detect any duplicates, any missing photos, any major errors. I will say that a duplicate is not necessarily bad. It's just an opportunity to review your information, because we could conceivably have multiple things happening at a single site, right? We could have culvert damage, we could have road closure, we could have debris all in one spot. So multiple entries for the same address is not a problem. It's just something we want to verify. This one is missing photos, so that's a pretty big clue. We'd want to go back to that and get the photo uploaded. So this is a really helpful tool for you to manage all of your entries. A few other things that we can do from here is we can export. And it's going to give us a few filters. So if I want to export on behalf of my whole county unincorporated area, with or without my jurisdictions, I can. If I only want certain statuses, maybe I only want the things that have been completed, I can export that. Or maybe I only want what's been assigned for some reason, I can export that, right? So I can decide what status. I can decide which types of entries. Maybe I'm creating an export for my highway people. They only care about bridges and culverts. They don't care about buildings, right? So I can be selective as to which reports I'm going to run, or I can sort by task, right? So you can see all sorts of different filters and how you want to export information. With my photos, I can stamp them with time and date, as well as latitude, longitude. So that's pretty helpful. And then I have different file types that I can export it as. So depending on your audience and needs, different file types available. The other thing we can do is import. So I mentioned before, maybe you have a work order system or CAD, and maybe I have a whole bunch of reported trees down that my CAD has, and I want to turn those into debris entries in Crisis Track. I can select this debris form and download a template. Once I have that template, I can take all the information from CAD and put it into this template and then upload it. And once I upload it, it's now available in Crisis Track. So that's one of our other advantages of being able to use this in a variety of different settings. All right. Are there any other questions about the options here in our entries? All right. So we did cover everything today. I'll open it up for any questions. Dale. You can come off mute, Dale. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question on videos. Does that have to be in the attachments, or can that be put into the photos?
Yeah, unfortunately, at this time, it has to be added as an attachment. It can't be a photo. Yeah, so usually you'd have to come into the desktop and do that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, sounds good. Appreciate it.
Sure. Other questions? All right. Well, we covered a lot today. I know you're probably hungry. It's lunchtime. So